Welcome into the Autzen Audibles post-game edition podcast. Matt Preem, Eric Scopel, Jared Mack on the show, fresh off an exit from Autzen Stadium Saturday afternoon. 38-24 victory by Oregon. Was a game in which guys like Oregon played good, but there was also plenty of areas to clean up, and yet they had 541 yards of offense. They outscored Washington State 28-13 in the second and third quarters. The Cougars were a combined 5 of 18 on third and fourth downs. Yes, they had 495 yards, and as Dan Lanning said, some of that was just scramble plays where they had Cameron Ward for a sack and he eluded it, and then everything kind of breaks down and he made a play, and that's just football. But a game in which there was a lot of attention on this team, how they would look after a tough 3-point loss at Washington last week. And we talked about it here on the show. We've heard about it, about how physical practice was, and they had to tone it back a little bit. And it kind of showed maybe a little bit during this game of just the lack of focus offensively with, I think, 7 penalties. I think all of them were on the offensive side of the football. But overall, this was kind of I don't want to say like a disappointing showing, but it wasn't Oregon's best. And yet they walked out of here with a convincing victory. It took a quarter to get there, but a convincing victory nonetheless against what I would call maybe the best 4-3 team in college football, Washington State, who was a lot better than maybe people thought coming in based off the last 2 weeks of their results.
The reality is Cameron Ward is going to pose problems like almost nobody Oregon or other teams would face this year in terms of his ability to extend plays and throw the ball with accuracy. And like that's what was sort of both, I'm sure, frustrating as an Oregon fan, because there were several plays that were the biggest chunk plays Washington State had where Oregon had a defender in the backfield, or Oregon actually had pretty good coverage downfield. And yet Ward makes a couple of guys miss on his way rolling right, flings it across his body downfield for a first down or a 40-yard completion. Like that was kind of the recipe for success for Washington State. And that was sort of what we talked about on Thursday's show on our prediction podcast of like why I was confident in Oregon winning was it was going to come down to if like Ward could do that for 4 quarters consistently. And the answer was he couldn't. And so I know it's a 14-point game aided by a late score. It was really a 3-score game for, before the last couple of minutes. And I didn't come away feeling like, man, this really exposed some things. Like, I don't think there's another quarterback that Oregon faces aside from Caleb Williams and from, if they get to the opportunity to play him again, Michael Penix in the conference championship game, that can really put pressure on Oregon's defense in similar ways and that can extend plays the way he did. Because 6 sacks for Oregon's defense, we're talking about on the way out of Autzen, like could have easily been 8, 9, 10 in terms of just how many times they affected him. And he was able to squirt out and throw the ball short or get the ball out of bounds. So some of that was Cam Ward, but I didn't think Oregon played a poor football game by any means. And the reality is when Oregon turned to its run game there in the second quarter, they just kind of ran away with this thing. And Washington State really wasn't able to slow Oregon's offense down once they kind of got a rhythm.
Yeah, and like you guys have said, like I wouldn't give Oregon here an A grade. And Eric, you'll have your team grade out tomorrow. I'm probably like a B, maybe a B minus. Sometimes it seemed a little bit flat in the beginning of the game, but I think they rallied around eventually, like you just talked about in the second quarter where they started to run the ball. Bucky Irving and Jordan James were phenomenal today. Obviously, Bucky Irving has 3 touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 1 passing, back-to-back drives at 43-yard touchdowns. Jordan James had a long of 37. Again, really good, just hard to bring down, just what you expect from Jordan James. And the rushing attack was something that we talked about a lot on the podcast on Tuesday and the podcast on Thursday and our predictions, just like this team is going to be able to run the ball. And that's exactly what they did. They had the most yards against a Power 5 opponent this year. I'm not sure they'll ever get up to the 314 that they got against Portland State, especially with the defenses along the way are coming up in this season. It's going to be very difficult. But there were moments, but that, at the beginning of the game where Washington State came out, they played hard. I thought that they might have a chance of rolling over They certainly didn't. They played hard to start the game. Got out to a 7-3 lead, or excuse me, a 10-3 lead at one point. Then Oregon comes back and ties it up. I thought they played really well. I thought Cam Ward was phenomenal. Thought he was great tonight. There wasn't a lot that Oregon could do in some throws. Specifically, like there was a 40-yarder to, it was a Kyle Williams. It was 47 yards. You had Dante Manning draped all over him. It was just a perfect ball. A lot of these were scramble plays that Dan and other defenders had talked about during the week of scramble drills and just trying to keep these guys in check and keep them in the pocket. And it's really difficult. I mean, Brandon Doyle talked about it all week where it's like, it's hard to bring down and we're looking to do better. And let alone, he had a whiffed sack during the game. He was just an escape artist and he was really damn good at it. Made really good throws on the run, just kind of picked spots. It's very similar to last year in Washington State when this offense is clicking. They're just kind of picking the zones that you're bad at, or just like quick outs, quick slants, quick hitters, just all of the above. But I thought the third quarter was when everything kind of changed for Oregon's defense. And that's where they outscored Washington State 14-3. I think they held them to under 70 yards of offense through the air. They did a lot better. They had some critical third down stops, some critical fourth down stops. I thought that was more of an encapsulation of what it looked like. And towards the end of the game, Washington State racked up a bunch of yards, and that was when the game was well within the balance. And the only thing that mattered was the spread, which Oregon didn't cover for the first time this year. So sorry if you bet Oregon and the spread. It's a shame. But I thought the second half defense looked a lot better than the first half defense. And, no duh, Jared. But, that was something that might have been a problem last season, were some of the second half adjustments. It just didn't seem or didn't feel like there were a lot of adjustments made last year from the coaching staff. This year, they've made some good adjustments in a bunch of their games this year. Texas Tech tonight, even against Washington, I thought that they made some good second half adjustments. This one, ends up in a win, and Oregon's offense puts 541 yards on the board for the second straight week. How about that?
We got to start individually with Bucky. Unbelievable performance by him. I think even though it's not his career high in rushing yards, I don't think it's his career high in receiving yards.
Nope,
I have that. Not. It's not. It's probably his best game. It's probably a career game. He was really good against Washington last season. He was really good against North Carolina in the bowl game. But we saw him power through for a touchdown on a short yardage gain, goal line play. We saw him go like 43 yards for a touchdown on a run where he just made one cut and left the entire defense in the dust. And then we saw him also on a check down play turn a simple just, oh, yeah, no one's open. I'm going to drop it off to Bucky Irving, who was completely wide open. But I think 1 yard past the line of scrimmage, maybe 2, and turn it into like a 44-yard touchdown, just straight right down the field for a big score. His play changed the game, and I've gone back and forth on, is Troy Franklin Oregon's best playmaker or is Bucky Irving Oregon's best playmaker? I don't know that answer, but I do think it's pretty evident now that this is probably Oregon's best 1-2 punch at the position, like Oregon's best receiver and Oregon's best running back. You run through the years, this is probably Oregon's best one they've had in a really long time.
Yeah, now you got the wheels turning there for me. I'm trying to think back to like who LaMichael was paired up with, who Kenyon.
They didn't have a lot of good receivers back then. I mean, well, maybe Carrington and like who was the running back when they went to the national championship?
Royce or Thomas Tyner. Yeah. Well, I mean, you even had some DeAnthony Thomas mixed in with the Michael stuff and Kenyon. I don't know. It's a good point, and to the point of like which one's better. Like I don't know if that's a question you have to answer, because like the reality is Oregon has really, really good individual skill talent, and that's where you see them have success. And that's why like people are so frequently criticizing play calling that it kind of blows my mind. Oregon, again, finished with 540 yards of total offense. They lead the country. I don't know if I think fans just have unrealistic expectations that Oregon's going to score 60 points and gain 600 yards every game, which again, no one in the country does. This is the most explosive offense statistically in the country, and this was another game where they hit 540 yards. They scored 38 points, could have been more if not for a little bit better execution in the red zone. This is why, like, if you're Will Stein, you come over here and you go, like, we've got some guys to distribute the ball to. And if whether or not it's Troy Franklin, who quietly like had a pretty good day, but was actually his worst game statistically of the season, 4 for 79. That was one of the things we talked about in the lead-in this week about like maybe Shaw Smith Wade kind of slows some of that down. Who steps up? Well, the answer was Tez Johnson. He had 90. He had, I think, a season high, at least at Oregon. Yeah, 94 yards, had a touchdown. But like this is where like Will Stein comes in. He's just got a lot of guys to throw the ball to or to move the ball around to. You know, whether it be in the run game, whether it be in the pass game, whether it be down the field, whether it be underneath passes, whether it be he could fill in the blank better than I could in terms of all the different things he can do. And again, I think that's what was so impressive here today. But also like just the fact that they basically went to the Oregon State versus Oregon strategy. I know fans of Oregon aren't going to like me bringing this up, but they didn't really throw the football to close the second quarter. And that was when they found some momentum because they just got to the point here where Washington State, which actually like started the game decent in terms of defending the run. I think it was like Bucky started like 5 carries for 10 yards. Like they just completely ran all over them for the rest of the second quarter, most of the third quarter. And Bucky deserves a ton of credit. I think he's got a really strong case to be Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week. I'd have to go look around the conference and see who else is having a strong week. But in a winning performance, it's hard to think there are going to be too many others that have better games than this.
Certainly. Yeah, Bucky was phenomenal. I thought that Washington State's defense actually did a really good job on Troy Franklin. I thought that they made Bo Nix's day harder. I thought that, especially in the first half, first quarter, Oregon wanted to take shots deep, and Washington State did a good job dropping 2 high safeties, like basically double teaming Troy, letting everything go underneath. And that's the nice thing about Oregon is like what you guys are talking about. You know, Tez Johnson had 76 yards after catch today, 94 total. So he did his part. He caught a slant and took off for a 41-yard gain. He broke some ankles at other parts in the open field. So, yeah, like I understand how sometimes the fans will be disappointed by the play calling, things like that. But it's all about game planning around a defense. And I thought that Washington State's defense did a good job game planning around Oregon's deep shots attacks because that's what's been really working for Oregon. For as honestly as much as Bo Nix has missed some deep throws, he was really good against he was really good against Washington last week and throwing deep to Troy, to multiple times to Troy. He's been good. He just has these clear misses at points, but that's a big killer because Oregon will just continue to draw you in on these runs because they're going to get 4, 5, 6 yards of carry. And before you know it, they're going to be halfway down the field because they're getting 6 yards of carry. You got to bring some extra guys in the box, and then suddenly they go deep. And it's I'm making it sound really simple. It's certainly not that simple. But to Eric's point, it's like they're 540 yards a night. They're 45 points a night. And I thought that they played well on offense. And this, again, was a day where they did not execute well on certain drives. Camden Lewis misses a field goal. That's 3 extra points off the board. They had a shitload of fucking offensive line penalties where it completely took them out of the drive, where you start in the red zone, start in positive territory, and you have boom, boom, back-to-back, couple on a Johnny Cornelius, where it goes back to, I think it was like 1st and goal from the 24 at one point. Those things hurt. So if you take those out, then you could, I guess you can get to like 52 points or 48 or whatever the case may be. But this Oregon offense is still going to fire on all cylinders. And again, even against Washington, 541 yards. So I thought they played well. I think they could have done better. Dan was very clear about that in the post-game press conference. He said, I know the guys, I know the quality and the talent in my locker room. I know that we can do better. We just need to find a way to go and attack it and achieve that better level. So it's certainly like a no days off type of deal here for the University of Oregon football team. They got Utah next week. It doesn't really get any easier other than Cal a few weeks down the road. So this is, it's good to see that they came out and played hard and played strong and played fast after the Washington loss. But there's still some things to work on, as there should be. Only 7 games into the year.
The criticism of the play calling doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because even with the slow start that you referenced, they went field goal, missed field goal attempt, field goal, punt their first 3 drives. But the first 2 plays of the game by Oregon was like a 33-yard pass to Terrence Ferguson and then a 12-yard run by Gary Bryant Jr. for a first down. And then they just kind of got off schedule by some execution mistakes that Oregon made themselves. Penalties. And then they missed the field goal. And even the field goal drive that they had, they did the same thing again. They had like boom, boom, explosive play, and then execution mistakes. And then I can't remember the sequence of what happened in the punt, but let's just say that Cam makes the field goal instead of misses it. Their drive chart would go field goal, punt, touchdown, touchdown, punt, touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. What are you complaining about with the play calls? I guess it goes back to Eric's point of just fans have this expectation that they're going to score 60 a game, and that's just not realistic. And the league is actually pretty darn good, and you're going to play some teams and you're going to have some B-level performances. Like Jared's right. This wasn't an A performance. It wasn't even an A- performance. And yet the offense still rolled up over 500 yards of offense. They were still 50% on third down. They almost averaged 10 yards per play in this game. Just some really good things when this is a down, air quotes, down performance by the offense. Do we want to switch to the defense real quick and talk injuries? Because let's talk with Bucky injury, because
Bucky first.
That's the big one first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it sounds like that it was an injury scare, but not a lot more. We'll have a better idea on Tuesday in terms of his practice availability. But Irving went down on, I think, about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. Kind of unclear exactly what it was. Matt, I think, thought maybe the ball kind of landed on his chest and maybe he got the wind knocked out of him. I have no idea. But I saw Bucky leaving the game, moving just fine. And Dan said afterwards that he was on the field for the final snap. And clearly you're not going to put a player of his importance on the field for a kneel down, in victory formation and possibly risk some weird thing happening to him. So I wouldn't be concerned too much with that. Again, we'll have a better idea later this week. But the big news, and I'll toss it to Jared to run into this because he wrote the story and I know was over there talking to him, but Jestin Jacobs, finally, the long-awaited debut. Mm-hmm. We've been asking about it. Fans have been asking, where is he? What's going on? I think some people at this point were questioning if he actually existed or if he was a figment of some imaginations. But he's a real person, and he went out there and played quite well.
He's real. Yeah, no, he definitely is real. All 6'4", 245 pounds of him. He played. He started on kickoff. He was on the very first play from scrimmage on Saturday, and that started his Oregon career. You didn't see him on defense until the second Washington State drive, where he played linebacker for a majority of that drive, switching between it was him and Jamal Hill. And if his performance today and his playing capabilities and his snap count is any idea of what he'll look like for the rest of the year, you're used to seeing him. He's going to be out in the field a lot. I don't have the snap counts. I'll get them tomorrow. But I would wager he was either the second or third most used linebacker today. And I think he honestly might have been second instead of Jamal Hill. He was out there a lot. He and Jeffrey Bossa were out there a lot. He finished with 6 tackles, 1 sack, the 5th of the game for Oregon, I believe. And I thought he looked good. There are some rust things that I'm sure he needed to knock off. I'll have to go and rewatch the game to really get a good idea about that. But he's athletic. He plays sideline to sideline. He makes tackles. He's physical. He's the biggest linebacker in the room by a good amount, by like basically 20 pounds and 2 to 3 or 4 inches on other guys. He's a different style of linebacker than other guys. But what gives him this opportunity to help this defense so much is his versatility. In like his second or third drive of the game, he went out and covered a wheel route to basic perfection on a running back. I thought it was really impressive to see that, especially picking up the running back out of the backfield, going and following him all the way down the field was great. And then the 3rd and 2 run stop just comes up and stuffs a run. You know, Oregon hasn't really had, that this season. They had it at some points last year with Noah Sewell, just a bigger dude being able to fill some gaps. And Jacobs paired with Bassa, I think is a really nice touch to this defense. So I was happy to see him out there on the field. Jacobs was really excited to be out there on the field. I asked him if he had like a highlight of the game, whether it be the sack or the 3rd and 2 stuff, or even the big hit on Cam Ward. He really just said it was playing in Autzen, playing for the team he grew up being a fan of in Oregon. And it was good to see him out there because we'd seen him in the spring and in the fall camp. He said he had something with his foot. He didn't go into specifics, which, that's fine. No worries. That set him back. And he has missed obviously the first 6 weeks of the season, or 6 games of the season. And now he showcased his talents on Saturday. I think he's going to be a main fixture of the defense moving forward. I was very impressed with what I saw, even though it was just his first game.
Yeah, we'll have to see the snap counts and maybe the rotations that impacts it moving forward. We'll get a good look of him, I think, next week again against Utah. In that offense, he's going to be an important piece to that program in that matchup. Who, by the way, as we're recording this, is up 5 at USC. They've all had a good run game, and that's where Jacobs will come into play specifically. Other injury news: defensively, we saw Khyree Jackson not play in this game. Jalil Florence was suited up in the first half, didn't play, which made you wonder maybe he's out. And then he actually ended up getting on the field in the second half. I don't know how much he played, but he was out there and he made some plays.
Had a sack.
He played all of the second half, basically.
Yeah, so he's back from his injury. Both guys got hurt at Washington. Jackson, I thought the DBs performed okay without their top corner. They did have Lincoln Victor for Washington State set an Autzen record for most receptions in a game with 16, and 170 receiving yards, just a bonkers number. They had some plays that they gave up that were deep shots, but you also have to credit some of that to dimes thrown by Cameron Ward, and also Cameron Ward, eluding a sack and creating something out of nothing. And this is one of the few opponents that's going to happen to. But I felt like the DBs played solid. You can't say they played lockdown defense. They played terrific. They gave up 438 yards or whatever it was passing. But there wasn't any glaring concerns. And that's kind of what you would hope to see in a game in which your top cover corner is just not playing.
Well, and the other thing with Victor was he works exclusively out of the slot. And I thought it was interesting. Oregon opened the game with Nico Reed, who's typically been he has been your most frequent used coverage corner in the slot. And he was opening the game outside with Khyree not available. Jalil, again, didn't play in that first half. And that's when Victor had all that success. And they had Triquez and Nico on the outside. And a lot of the time, they didn't even have they didn't have a third true corner out there like Nico would be typically. So I wonder if some of that was personnel related, because you just saw a ton of Lincoln Victor matched up against either Evan Williams or against Tyshim Johnson or Steve Stevens or whoever it was. And they just went there over and over again and had some success, obviously. I didn't think the secondary played awful. There were a couple of busted plays. There were a couple of plays where the Washington State players just made really good contested catches. You certainly don't come out of this one giving up 438 yards, which we looked up before the show. That is the largest total from a Dan Lanning coached Oregon defense to date. Feeling great about how the secondary played. I also will, again, I'll have to go back and watch it again myself, but I didn't in the moment come away going like, oh man, these guys are terrible. Like Oregon's just getting torched out here by corners. It felt like there were some nice contested catches. And then there were some, hey, this is Cam Ward doing Cam Ward things. And they're going to throw the ball 50 times in a game with the level of athlete he is and the arm strength he has. And just a decent collection of receivers around him. There's going to be some success out there. I wanted to highlight the true freshman outside linebackers, but if Jared had something else he wanted to add on the secondary stuff, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought they were fine. It's a hard team to cover. It's much different than Washington is, where
Yeah.
man-to-man defense can work at points. You saw it work at points against Washington. Washington State is just, it's not the same as when Mike Leach ran it, but it's similar. There's just going to be a lot of yards. There's going to be a lot of quick hits, like I said earlier, slants, out routes, all of the small ones, and then occasionally they're going to take a shot deep. And a lot of these catches, Lincoln Victor is a good player. He has been dinged up the last 2 weeks. It looks pretty freaking healthy to me now. But he's a tough guy to cover, and slot receivers can do that. We've seen that happen against Oregon defenses in the past. We've seen it happen against basically every team's defense, where a good slot guy can really nick you and make it really difficult for you to have a good defensive day. And that's what Victor did today. I thought they were fine. There were some good moments in coverage. I don't think they really didn't let anybody beat them deep. To steal a quote from Jeff Bossa, like butt free. Other than the what was it, the double pass or like the flea flicker, where there was a drop along the sideline.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big play, but that was the only one where I really remember, like, oh, that guy is wide open down there. He is wide open. And everybody else, like Eric, like you said, contested catches, it's kind of like basketball. Play great D. Sometimes the offense is just better. And sometimes that happens for Oregon, and they get a contested catch, and everybody's a fan about it. Talks about what a great catch it is and not the defense. But here we are to talk about the defensive side of it all. Like Dante Manning and Nico Reed, they had some good defensive plays, but sometimes the offense just wins. So I think they were fine. Probably, Eric, I'll do your grades for you. It's probably a C+, maybe a C. Just, mediocre.
Okay.
You want to write that down? Yeah.
I just marked it over. Yep, I got it down. I'll remember that tomorrow. My little C+ on my notepad, which I'll remember what that means.
Yeah.
No, I wanted to, because I think it's worthwhile to talk that out, just because when Oregon gives up over 400 yards passing in a game, even though it's a game that they win fairly comfortably, it's going to be the topic of conversation, and I think rightfully so. I also think it's worthwhile to credit, and we talked about this quite a bit this year, but this was their most impactful game, I think, collectively. The three true freshman edge rushers. Blake Purchase had his first sack. Mateo Uyunglele had his first sack, also had 3 tackles, had another tackle for loss. And Tatum Tuioti had a pass deflection and 3 tackles himself. It's like all 3 of those guys are clearly going to be dudes. We talked about it already. They're already pretty darn impactful, but it's not like these moments happened at the very end of a game in mop-up duty. Like
Right.
both Mateo and Purchase's sacks happened like while the first team defense was primarily out there, or whatever, while the key personnel players are out there, because Oregon, you could say they have a first team defense, but they also play like 17 or 18, 20 guys a game with pretty high, regularity.
Right.
And those guys are part of that rotation, as they should be, as they're proving to be. And you should be really excited by what those 3 are doing right now. And I think even more excited by what the future will hold with those guys, with some of the other recruits that Oregon has either landed to this point or is at least, like Elijah Rushing, for example, 5-star, one of the top edge players in the country. Sounds like Oregon has a good chance with him. Like this could be pretty special in years forward, and you're kind of getting a taste of it right now with those guys. Purchase's sack was really impressive. Just his closing speed on Cam Ward was like, yeah, that's going to work. That's going to work at this level. That'll translate. So no, I thought those 3 guys played well, and it was worth acknowledging that. Yeah, when you have 3 true freshmen off the edge that are all playing as many snaps as they do and playing as well, they deserve a little shine.
I really like Purchase. I think he's top tier. He was one of my favorite kids coming in this 24 or 23 class. He needs to just work on his strength, but shoot, man, he's 18, 19. Like he's going to get stronger as time goes on. And unfortunately, I didn't get to watch Mateo's sack because I was headed down to the field. So I got to go back and watch that one. But he's been close a bunch this year. It's nice to see him get one. And Tatum, that pass deflection was on a 4th down, 3rd or 4th down. It was a big moment of the game at the time. And like you said, they're all dudes. Dan always preached like, oh, if you're good enough, you're old enough. And well, these kids are good enough. And last year's group of players maybe weren't at the same caliber, But this is an impact caliber player already as a true freshman. I mean, all these guys are getting probably 15 to 25 snaps a game, just depending on the circumstances. So, and Dan talked about it. He said 15% of the snaps on the year are from true freshmen. So seems a little high, but these guys are good. And I'm excited to watch those guys develop and play over the course of the year. I think Purchase has gotten better almost every game. He looks like a quality matchup in any Pac-12 game for sure.
Should also point out that Evan Williams led the team, 14 tackles, another really good game for him. He had a sack as well, 8 solo tackles. I think 35 of Oregon's 67 registered tackles were solo, which is kind of what you want to see. Oregon making tackles in space, not giving up an extra couple yards and Oregon having to rally to the football. Just overall, solid performance. Like we've said, like they gave up a lot of yards. Some of that's Washington State's offense and the QB that they have, and some of that's just some good plays being made. But overall, you walk out of this 38-24 victory. Oregon 6-1. They keep pace as one of the top teams in the conference. It should be reflected by that in the polls, which don't matter right now, but nonetheless, people like numbers next to names, and Oregon's will go up. And you go into a week now at Utah, who's in a dogfight with USC right now. It's kind of what you want to see. This game going back and forth, pushing both teams to the limits. And you feel confident. I mean, it's at Utah. It's going to be a tough game. They always are hard on the road. They are talented. It's probably going to be near a coin flip, maybe a little bit more one way or the other from a favorable standpoint, betting odds wise. But, you look at this and you go in thinking this is a very winnable game. There are minimal concerns from an Oregon perspective, after this win over Washington State, and you're just feeling good about where this program is heading after a tough loss after Washington last week.
Yeah, we should say that part. I don't know if we really – I mean, they needed a get-right game. Certainly, as we said, there are some things that weren't fantastic, but, I don't think – I'm sure you come out of this game with a lot of things you want to work on, but also feeling proud of the effort. Oregon proved why that they are still a top 10 team. They proved that they are very much capable of taking care of every game on their schedule. I had 2 other things I wanted to point out before we wrap. One's really quick, and one I don't know if we want to chat a little bit more. But Patrick Herbert had probably the open field block of the year to this point on a guy who just was kind of I don't go back and watch the play. I think it was Devin Richardson for Washington State.
He had no idea where the ball was.
He had no idea where the ball was, and he's just out here running. And meanwhile, Bucky Irving's getting ready to score a touchdown on a pass reception, and Patrick Herbert put him on his ass. And Dan was a big fan of that play. The other thing was Camden Lewis, 3 straight games now with a missed field goal. I don't want to make it necessarily bigger than it has to be, but it has to be something we talk about because that's not a trend you want to see. And these are makeable kicks. Not that this is a chip shot, but it was, I think, 46 or 47 yards. That's a range that should be within his range as a college kicker. You should be able to make anything basically within 50, in my opinion. I think you're now in a spot where you would expect Dan to continue to be aggressive on 4th downs in that part of the field, because I don't think you feel fantastic sending him out there, let's say next week against Utah in a close game, and asking him to kick a field goal probably 42 yards or more. I just think you have to have a little bit of doubt now. And credit to Dan for giving him an opportunity on the first drive to go in there and kick a field goal, and then an opportunity, obviously, the next drive that Camden makes was a chip shot this time. But this is a trend that you don't like to see, and we've all been very high on Camden. But 3 straight weeks with a missed field goal is really tough when you need all of these points.
He's missed 3 of his last 5.
It's not great.
Not great.
I mean, it has to be somewhat of a concern now. It can't not be. Literally 3 of 5 is bad. That's 2 of 5 that he's made. That's 40%. That's a really good 3-point% shooter. Not a good kicker. But yeah, I mean, these aren't chip shots. You have to give Camden the benefit of the doubt. He was one of the best kickers in the Pac-12, honestly, the last 2 years, at least statistically. Last year, for sure. He's made an incredible improvement into his game after coming to Oregon in 2019 and being the freshman kicker that, who, coincidentally had the game winner against Washington State that year. It could just be a rough patch. Could be a slump. Everybody gets into a slump at whatever it is they do for a living. And Camden kicks for a living, so maybe he's in a slump there. I don't think it's the yips. If it were the yips, I think we would all really know if it were the yips, like with extra points and things like that. But it's certainly not an encouraging sign. And his kickoffs today were much better. None that were out of bounds, anything like that. So that's a positive direction. But yeah, it's just like I said, it's not encouraging. He missed it wide left. He had missed all the other kicks wide right. So meet me in the middle, Camden. You got this.
Yes, he was 27 of 32 during the 21 and 2022 football season. So he's missed 5 over a 2-year period. Now in a 3-game stretch, he's missed 3. I agree with Jared. Like it's not the yips. He's just probably in a funk, and that happens with kickers. You just hope that to get out of it, they're not relying on him to make some deep ones. Give him some short ones. They regain his confidence a little bit, and get that back into groove and into sync for him. And because it's going to come up again. There's going to be a game in this season where it could be a 3-point win, or they could be trying to tie the game very late in a big road game, maybe even next week. I don't know, but it's going to factor up, and you're going to need to have him on this team and making field goals. I don't think it justifies a switch of kicker. That shouldn't even be a conversation.
No.
That happens.
Yep,
it's
agreed.
Basically now going to be okay, if we're 40 and out, do we kick it or do we try and go for it? And it's honestly probably going to be a case by case, situation. There's probably not going to be a clean answer for that. All right. I think that's going to do it for us here on this post-game edition of the Autzen Audibles Podcast. Again, Oregon wins 38-24. Go to duckterritory.com for more full coverage of that. We've got multiple stories up from that game, and we'll have more up throughout Saturday evening into Sunday morning and afternoon whenever you're listening to this podcast. Next time you hear from us will be on Monday, so make sure to send Eric those mailbag questions heading into road week on the road at Utah. Until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles Podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.